Imagine this. You are standing in the middle of a heated fight. Your heart is beating. Every word seems like a weapon, every statement a war. You carefully construct your next remark, trying to establish that you are right. But the other individual, they are doing the exact same thing. Neither of you is listening, simply waiting for an opportunity to strike back. And then N steps in. He does not take a side. He does not tell you what to say. Instead, he murmurs something frightening in your ear. You have already lost. What does he mean? You are battling, you are defending yourself, you are maintaining your ground. How could that spell defeat? Because according to N, the instant you participate in this type of struggle, you have already relinquished your authority. True power, he contends, does not come from battling to be right. It comes from something considerably more unexpected. So, what is this hidden power, and why does silence frequently speak louder than words? Let's go into his thinking and unearth the silent technique that gives you genuine power. Most individuals assume that power derives from winning disputes, proving others incorrect, and dominating conversations. But Friedrich N. had a very different opinion. He thought power was not in words, it was in control. Why do people argue? If you've ever found yourself in a heated dispute, you know how fast things escalate. But have you ever paused to ask, why do people quarrel in the first place? N would respond that most disputes are not about truth, but about deeper psychological demands, not ego protection. People quarrel because their identity is at stake. Accepting they are wrong feels like losing a part of oneself. The mind rejects this at all costs. Power struggles. Many disputes are not about facts or logic, they are contests for supremacy. Who speaks last? Who determines the tone? Who makes the other back down? Social validation. Some people fight not because they believe in their position, but because they want to be viewed as clever, confident, or strong by their peers. Perceived these acts as evidence of weakness. He thought that persons who react emotionally to discussions are being manipulated. The instant you let someone irritate you, you have already forfeited N's will to power and the Übermensch. N's renowned theory of will to power is often misconstrued. It's not about raw power, it's about the capacity to impose your will on reality. This does not always require words. Sometimes the strongest strength is the ability not to respond. And here is where the Übermensch comes in, the ideal, superior man in N's ideology. The Übermensch is not emotionally reactive like the typical individual. He does not debate solely to win or establish a point. Instead, he decides when to engage and when to keep mute, because power is not about talking. It's about managing the entire relationship. Example: imagine a gathering where two people are bickering. One is noisy, confrontational, attempting to prove they are correct. The other is calm, composed. They listen more than they say. They don't get drawn into emotional back and forths. But when they eventually say anything, it's strong, well-timed, and transforms the entire conversation. Who actually has the power here? And would say that the one who keeps in control, who doesn't respond emotionally, always wins in the long run. Why strategic quiet is more potent than winning arguments. Quiet, when utilized appropriately, is not weakness. It's a psychological weapon. It drives the other person to share more about themselves. It makes individuals feel unsure, making them second-guess their own statements. It generates tension, and tension makes people uncomfortable, which gives you control. The Übermensch doesn't just keep silent in fights, he utilizes silence as a tool, a pause, a moment of control, a well-timed retort that changes the subject in his favor. This is why N's concept of power is not about fighting. It's about conquering the battlefield before the combat ever begins. Silence is not merely the lack of speech. It's a tool, a weapon wielded by history's greatest minds to conquer fights of intellect, business, and war. N's notion of power was not about shouting arguments or winning disputes. It was about influence, control, and strategic restraint. Let's study 3 renowned personalities that represented this principle: Socrates, Steve Jobs, and Mamoto Musashi. Socrates' method: winning without fighting. Socrates never engaged in traditional debates. He did not shout, assault, or try to push his argument. Instead, he developed a tactic so potent that it still dominates intellectual talks today: the Socratic method, a form of questioning that made individuals confront their own inconsistencies. Imagine this: a proud Athenian politician claims to be the wisest man in the city. Instead of overtly criticizing him, Socrates calmly asks, "What is wisdom?" The guy, anxious to display his ability, begins explaining it. But with every question Socrates asks, the definition breaks apart. The politician, once so arrogant, suddenly stumbles over his own words, recognizing he has no actual understanding of the same notion he speaks about. Socrates did not need to tell people they were wrong. He helped them recognize it themselves. He realized a key truth: people don't accept what you tell them. They only accept what they find on their own. This is the essence of silent strength. Instead of indulging in futile yelling battles, ask questions that cause others to question themselves. Steve Jobs' strategy: the art of managed conflict. If Socrates dominated via inquiry, Steve Jobs dominated by strategic persuasion. He did not avoid disputes, he planned them. His leadership at Apple was not about fighting every tiny issue, it was about dominating the wider discussion. Jobs had a simple yet strong principle. You don't spend energy on meaningless disputes, but when something actually matters, you go all in. One prominent example was his dispute with his own team over the iPhone's design. Engineers wanted tactile buttons. Jobs wanted a complete touchscreen. Instead of debating incessantly, he got them to see his vision. He let them discuss, let them voice their fears until they recognized via his direction that a touchscreen device was not just conceivable, it was inevitable. He did not teach them what to think. He made them feel it was their idea all along. Most people argue out of vanity to prove they are right, whereas Jobs argued with a purpose: to win others over, not to make a point. And that's the key. If your words don't lead people toward action, they are simply noise. Mamoto Musashi, the silent samurai who won before the combat began. Now, let's go beyond philosophy and business to the war. Mamoto Musashi, the unbeaten samurai, grasped a simple truth. The greatest way to win a combat is to never draw your sword. Musashi won over 60 duels, but not simply through physical talent. His biggest successes were psychological. He played mind tricks, frightening his opponents before the conflict even begun. One noteworthy example: his bout against Saki Kojiro. Kojiro was a skilled swordsman famed for his devastating quickness. But Musashi didn't challenge him head-on. Instead, he came up hours late to the duel, leaving Kojiro angry. By the time Kojiro eventually met him, he was so blinded by fury that he made blunders, allowing Musashi to defeat him with ease. Musashi realized that if your adversary is emotional, they are already weak. N's philosophy coincides nicely with this. The Übermensch does not react. He directs the reaction of others. Musashi taught that silence, patience, and psychological domination are frequently more potent than raw force. The unifying thread. power via strategic quiet. What do Socrates, Steve Jobs, and Musashi all have in common? They never spent energy on pointless debates. They did not respond. They set the conditions of interaction. They knew that genuine power is not in words. It's in influence. The next time you feel the impulse to dispute, ask yourself, am I reacting emotionally or am I managing the situation? Because genuine strength is silent. Why do we argue? Why do we feel the need to show ourselves correct, to fight back, to defend our ideals, even when the debate is going nowhere? Most individuals feel that arguments are about truth. They are not. Arguments are about power. The more you dispute, the more you expose about yourself, your fears, your emotional triggers, and most significantly, the fact that someone else is dictating your reaction. Understood this thoroughly. His philosophy of will to power was not only about physical domination. It was about managing oneself so well that people fall into your sway without even recognizing it. And current psychology demonstrates exactly how correct N was. Why do people become caught in arguments? Arguments are not rational, they are psychological. When we dispute, we assume we are standing up for our views. In actuality, we are often only reacting to deep-rooted psychological cues. Let's break it down. 1. Cognitive biases. Your brain wants to win, not learn. Our brains are equipped with biases that make us awful at debating intelligently. The major culprits. Confirmation bias. We only seek for information that confirms what we already think. Backfire effect. When someone questions our opinions, we don't alter our minds. We double down. Dunning-Kruger effect. The less we know about something, the more certain we are in our judgments. These prejudices render most debates worthless. No one genuinely listens. Instead, they merely wait for their turn to talk. N's Übermensch avoids this pitfall. He listens, observes, and selects whether the conversation is worth engaging in. 2. Emotional triggers. Why we take debates personally. Have you ever pondered why certain disagreements make you furious while others don't affect you at all? That's because we don't dispute over logic. We struggle about identity. When someone disagrees with us on a deep level, it seems like a personal attack. That's why conversations over politics, religion, or philosophy become nasty so swiftly. Because individuals don't just feel like their beliefs are being questioned, they feel like they themselves are being assaulted. This is why the most powerful individuals in history never debate emotionally. If someone can make you emotional, they dominate you. The Übermensch does not fall into this trap. He does not react. He observes, analyzes, and then determines whether or not to reply. 3. The requirement for affirmation. The true reason people dispute. At the foundation of most disagreements isn't fact, it's ego. People don't simply want to be right, they want to be regarded as correct. And knew that most humans need affirmation from the herd. They dispute not to pursue truth, but to earn approval. But the Übermensch does not require confirmation. He makes his own truth. Think about the most significant personalities in history. Did they waste time debating with critics? No, they concentrated on their mission, disregarded distractions, and allowed their actions speak louder than words. Was ahead of his time. His thoughts on power, control, and quiet correlate nicely with contemporary psychology studies. Let's break it down. 1. Power. Dynamics in social interactions. Social psychologists have shown that the most powerful persons in any group are not the ones who say the most, but the ones who control the flow of discourse. They don't interrupt, They don't over-explain. They chose their words carefully, making listeners hold on to every phrase. This is why successful leaders rarely raise their voices. They don't need to. When they talk, people listen because they have already generated an atmosphere of authority by their silence. 2. The function of self-restraint and persuasion. Research in behavioral psychology suggests that persons who keep cool and composed in discussions are considerably more convincing than those who get agitated. Why? Because people are predisposed to regard serenity as confidence. N thought that genuine power came from self-mastery. The Übermensch is not a slave to his emotions. He does not react, he decides, and it makes him untouchable. The actual reason N regarded quiet as power was not because he wanted people to avoid confrontation. It was because he realized that the one who controls his own reaction controls the entire debate. Let's put this into perspective. If someone insults you and you react, you have lost. If someone confronts you and you feel the impulse to defend yourself, you have lost. If you are lured into an argument solely to prove you are correct, you have lost. But if you watch, maintain cool, and reply only when it fits your objective, you have already won. Ann's ideology is not about keeping silent forever. It's about selecting your fights. Ask yourself, am I speaking because I want to, or because I feel pushed to? Am I reacting emotionally, or am I in control of my response? Is this fight worth my energy, or am I just feeding my ego? Because genuine power, as N understood it, is not in words. It's in the stillness before the words, the pause that makes others lean in, the decision to speak only when it counts. And that is the silent technique that gives you power. Silence is strong. But does it imply you should always keep silent? Silence may be a weapon, but wielding it indiscriminately can be just as stupid as speaking without consideration. If quiet were the only way to power, then history's greatest minds, philosophers, revolutionaries, and visionaries would have stayed unheard. Yet they talked because true power is not in avoiding confrontation. It's in understanding when to engage and when to pull back. Ann's will to power. Conflict as a road to mastery. Many mistake N as an advocate of disengagement, of detachment from the conflict. But his vision of the desire to power was never about passivity. It was about mastery, progress, and self-overcoming. Power is not in quiet alone. It's in control. Avoiding conflict altogether is not wisdom, it's fear disguised as moderation. Mastering conflict does not mean rejecting it, it means embracing it as a tool, and Übermensch does not dispute over minor matters, but he also does not flee from essential conflicts. He realizes that confrontation can be a crucible for strength. Why do most people avoid arguments? Because they're unpleasant. But N recognized that suffering produces strength. He regarded hardship as necessary, not as something to be avoided. Weak minds shun problems. Strong thinkers welcome them, because difficulty forces perfection. Imagine a fighter who never joins combat. A sword that is never tested against steel will never be battle-ready. In the same manner, a mind that is never challenged is dull, feeble, and frail. Without intellectual confrontation, your ideas stay unproven. Without struggle, your convictions stay empty. Think about the bravest minds in history. Galileo was punished for questioning the Church's vision of the universe. Socrates was sentenced to death for challenging established ideas. N himself was rejected as a crazy in his day. Yet now, his ideas impact current thought. Their power did not come from quiet. It came from selecting their conflicts properly and engaging in essential confrontation. There's a significant distinction between arguing to prove you are correct and arguing to influence reality. N understood this. The best leaders, thinkers, and visionaries don't avoid disagreements. They utilize them strategically. Consider Socrates. He did not challenge people's views directly. He questioned them until they crumbled on their own. N's works were aimed to confront, provoke, and shock people out of their mental complacency. Steve Jobs didn't shun disagreement. He utilized it to push individuals past their boundaries and promote creativity. Powerful individuals don't fight for affirmation. They argue for transformation. They don't battle to win discussions. They strive to create the world in their image. The Übermensch does not debate to appease his ego. He argues with purpose. Here's when you should engage. When the argument sharpens your thoughts. When it unveils deeper realities. When it challenges you, or others to grow. When it swings power in your favor. But here's when you should not. When you are only defending your ego. When the other person is not receptive to change. When it's a fruitless emotional war. When your quiet itself is a power move. Arguing without strategy is weakness. Arguing with precision is strength. N was not frightened of disputes. He loved confrontation, but on his own terms. If an argument makes you weaker, avoid it. If an argument makes you stronger, interact with it. If an argument is only a diversion, dismiss it altogether. If confrontation makes you stronger, it's not something to be avoided, it's something to be mastered. True strength rests not in quiet alone, but in understanding when to speak and when to keep silent. If you had the choice between never arguing again or learning the art of influencing via conflict, which would make you more powerful? Imagine this. You wake up one day and a voice informs you you only have 100 words left to speak in your entire life. Every syllable, every word suddenly holds weight. Would you squander them in a heated argument? Would you waste them attempting to prove yourself to someone who isn't even listening? Or would you choose them deliberately, like a warrior polishing his final sword before battle? This is where true power rests. Realized something that most people ignore. Words are cash. The more you spend them carelessly, the less precious they become. Now image yourself in an argument. Your heart beats. Your mind overflows with comebacks, defenses, endpoints. You're dying to prove. But stop. Breathe. Ask yourself, who genuinely holds the power here? The one feverishly attempting to prove himself or the one who understands when to keep silent? Because quiet is not weakness. It's strategy. It's control. It's the skill of making others doubt themselves without you ever needing to convince them. So here's the challenge. The next time you're going to dispute, halt. Instead of reacting instantly, observe. Watch how the other person shows their shortcomings. See how they show you their anxieties, their insecurities, just by the way they speak. And then, when the time is perfect, pick your words like a master, or don't talk at all, because genuine strength is silent. Want more thoughts on philosophy, psychology, and power? Hit subscribe and turn on the bell symbol so you never miss a deep dive into the concepts that affect the way we think and live. Stay sharp, stay powerful.